I'm Jay Elias. Welcome to this episode of Live and Learn. Would you trust me? Would you trust me to give you a ride home if your car broke down late at night and I was passing by on the road, I pulled over and I offered you a lift? Would you trust me to borrow your car? Would you trust me to borrow $10? How about $100? If you said to yourself that you would trust me, maybe to give you a ride when your car broke down, why? Is it that you think I look or sound trustworthy or seem trustworthy because of programs like this one? You might trust me to give you a ride, but not to lend me money or borrow your car. And trust means different things to different people, and it's not necessarily an all or nothing proposition. There are those we trust with and for certain things, and those we would trust with everything or nothing at all. We humans are social beings from the get-go. We're born to be engaged with others, which is what trust is largely about. And that's been an advantage in our struggle for survival. As we've learned over the past few years in particular, it's an awfully confusing world we live in. Sometimes we encounter the truth, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we deliver the truth, sometimes we don't. Sometimes a picture is real, sometimes it's been manipulated or photoshopped. Sometimes a statement or news story is factual. Sometimes it's exaggerated or fabricated. And we know that not everyone is trustworthy. And I think most of us would agree that to trust just about anyone or anything would be naive, gullible, and foolhardily. Sometimes it is. There have always been scammers, conmen, cheaters, schemers, manipulators who expertly betray our trust. Meet George C. Parker. He was a confidence man, a con man, best known for having sold the Brooklyn Bridge on multiple occasions. Since the bridge was completed in 1883, the idea of illegally selling it became the ultimate example of the power of trust and persuasion. It's been said that a good salesman could sell it, a great con man would actually do it, and the perfect sucker would fall for the scam. Parker, who was adept at selling other things, like the Statue of Liberty and Grant's tomb, produced impressively forged documents on parchment paper that purported to show that he was the true owner of the Brooklyn Bridge. He then convinced buyers that they could make a fortune by controlling access to the bridge's roadway by requiring tolls. So on several occasions, Parker's scam victims had to actually be removed from the bridge by police as they tried to erect toll barriers for their bridge. His exploits gave rise to phrases such as, "And if you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you," clearly insinuating that someone is gullible. And although technology has changed since the days of George Parker, the challenge of knowing how, when, and who to trust has not. It's still an essential skill, and in a complex, changing world with constant connectivity, it's easy for anyone, even the savviest among us, to make trust-related mistakes. Some, though, are easier to avoid than others. Think about this. It's been said that trust is built in the very smallest of moments, not in the big, grand scheme of our lives. Trust, it's about people as individuals, and we shouldn't trust or distrust someone based solely on their title, position, education, or financial success. Some of the most untrustworthy people have held positions of authority and, of all things, trust. And we shouldn't judge someone's trustworthiness simply on their words either. We need to weigh what they say against what they do repeatedly. Our words provide the backdrop for how our actions are measured, and it's that alignment between words and actions that creates the kind of integrity that serves as the foundation for trust. The problem? It's that a lot of people know just what to say and how to say it, but they lack the ability to do much of what they say. So we need to pay attention to mismatched words and actions, including your own. Overpromising is easy. Consistently delivering on what you say takes real effort. Many of us may say that we're too smart to be trusting of others and that we really don't have a lot of trust in other people. But you know, if you were to take a step back and look at your everyday life, I'll bet you it tells a different story. You see, trust seems to be a default position for most of us, actually. We trust routinely, reflexively, and presumptively. Sometimes we don't even know we're trusting. If you pause and consider some of the situations you encounter most every day of your life, you'll find that you actually do trust more people than you thought. And it's more often than not people you hardly know or don't know at all who you trust. You have a presumptive trust that the medicine you take is safe for you, as is the water, the juice, or the coffee that you drink. And when you eat in a restaurant or a dining room, you're trusting someone. Again, probably someone you don't know or don't know very well. The person who prepares your food did so safely and appropriately. And the person who served your food did so as well. You have a presumptive trust in the farmers who provided the ingredients and the people who provided the fish, poultry, or the meat you eat. You trust those people and those processes without knowing most of them and without consciously thinking about them. Presumptive trust. Through our experiences, we've come to learn that for the most part, we can trust most of the people we encounter, because it's only rarely that it happens when they break that trust. It might be the errant driver who doesn't stop when you're entering a crosswalk, or the restaurateur who violates food health and safety codes to save a few bucks. Maybe it's the car manufacturer who makes a car with a defective part. And knowing whether or not to trust someone can be critically important at times, even life or death. And sometimes that assessment of trustworthiness is made by simply looking at someone's face and deciding on their trustworthiness well before you're able to consciously analyze or assess them. Picture this. A woman has just left the grocery store. She's walking through the parking lot to her car when she's caught in a thunderstorm. The skies have opened up. It's pouring out. Lightning is flashing all around. And in one arm, she's holding her 2-month-old child. In the other, she has a couple of now soaking wet and about to break bags of groceries. And she's holding the hand of her 3-year-old toddler. A well-groomed, pleasant-looking, elderly woman with an umbrella is nearby, and she sees the young woman trying to dodge the rain. And now she's fumbling to find her car keys, juggling the infant, the toddler, the groceries that are about to tear apart, and she's looking very much like someone who could really use a helping hand. So the other older woman with her umbrella scurries over and offers to hold the infant so that the woman can open the car door and get her children out of the pouring rain, or worse, struck by lightning. Can you and she count on someone's appearance to decide if they're trustworthy? And for most of us, it does seem we make snap judgments about someone's trustworthiness and even their competence based on facial features alone. In another study that was published in the Journal of Neuroscience, researchers found that our brains take just 3/100ths of a second, less time than it takes to blink your eye, to decide trustworthiness. Our snap judgments about trustworthiness are so rapid that we make them, in most cases, well before we know anything about the other person. And not only do we make quick decisions about someone's trustworthiness, that initial snap judgment apparently colors our perceptions about them from that point forward. So what's a trustworthy face look like? Mine? Studies repeatedly have found that the most trustworthy faces have upturned eyebrows and lips, prominent cheekbones, and the least trustworthy among us, by facial feature alone, have eyebrows pointing downwards, lips curled at the edges, and sunken cheekbones. But understand, there's absolutely no evidence that any of those physical characteristics have any bearing on whether someone is really trustworthy. It's just that's how many people judge them to be. And it seems that we tend to like strangers better if they look like someone who's already one of our friends or a family member. And before you dismiss that snap judgment and rapid, almost automatic response as being shallow and superficial, consider how it probably served our earliest ancestors well when they had to decide in the blink of an eye whether an approaching stranger was a potential friend or foe and possibly going to do harm or kill them. This rapid assessment and snap judgment of trustworthiness can still be helpful to us in certain situations. Think about walking alone in a dark alley at night and you hear someone approaching you. Snap judgment. We also hear it time and again that first impressions are important. After all, it's been said, you only have one chance to make a good first impression. For better or worse, those first impressions lead to quick assumptions and judgments. That tenth of a second or so that it takes to make a first impression in person or through a photograph has lasting implications for our relationships, employment, and how people generally will interact with us. First impression bias. It's a limitation in our information processing that causes us to make quick, incomplete, and often inaccurate observations about someone based on the first piece of information we perceived. For example, if someone views you as untrustworthy the first time they see you, they may assume everything about you is untrustworthy. And that leads to another kind of bias known as confirmation bias, which suggests that once you've formed an opinion about someone or something, like their trustworthiness, you tend to embrace only the information that confirms your initial opinion, while ignoring or discounting pretty much any information that casts doubt on it. And it seems most of us have a tendency to reaffirm our initial assessment of others by intentionally giving greater weight to evidence that confirms and reinforces our point of view. And so we always tend to deny or intentionally avoid considering any evidence to the contrary of our first impressions. Confirmation bias. It suggests that we don't perceive circumstances objectively, and as a result, we become something of a prisoner to our beliefs and assumptions and unable to reassess our perspective or open our minds to contrary information or evidence. The obvious pitfall to being held hostage to a belief is that we lose the motivation to gather or be open to accepting new information, even when doing so may help us to update assumptions that may no longer be accurate or valid. In other words, we see what we want to see, we believe what we want to believe. If our initial impression is that someone is trustworthy, then we want to continue believing that even when there's evidence right in front of us that they're not. And over the past decade or so, we've seen how confirmation bias has played a large role in our lives, in politics and in society. Think about those who will only watch and believe what they hear on CNN, for example, and those who will only watch and believe what they hear on Fox News. Warren Buffett summed it up when he referred to the theory of confirmation bias, saying, "What the human being is best at doing is interpreting all new information so that their prior conclusions remain intact." And those first impressions about whether you can trust someone can also cause something known as the halo effect. That's when an initial positive impression of a person unconsciously influences your perception of them as a whole. For example, if you judge someone as outgoing or attractive, you may also judge them to be more trustworthy than they really are. You initially saw something positive in them, maybe as superficial as their facial features or their clothes. And that positivity, that halo affects everything you see about that person from that point forward. The truth is that we dramatically overestimate the significance of someone's face when we're assessing their trustworthiness. Studies have measured test subjects' reactions to a series of photographs of the same person making different faces and found that even the slightest change in expression can elicit an entirely different reaction as to whether they are trustworthy, depending upon whether the person was smiling or frowning. The same person can be perceived as both trustworthy and untrustworthy, extroverted and introverted, attractive and unattractive. The irony is that if we relied a little less on someone's face, we might actually be a better judge of their character and trustworthiness. There's no doubt it can be difficult to accurately assess someone's trustworthiness when you need to make a quick decision, like the woman in the parking lot. But whenever circumstances allow, try to take a step back to think before jumping headfirst into a situation you may later regret. That's just not common sense. It's something even the best of con artists know. That is, your brain makes far less rational decisions when those decisions are based on impulse and emotion. It's when that amygdala of your brain decides based on emotion and the fight or flight response kicks in, rather than your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain designed to weigh choices based on rational factors and past experience. When someone you've just met tells you that they feel like they've known you their entire life, they're ready to be your bosom buddy, a warning light should appear. It may well be that they're the kind of impulsive person who generally doesn't think things through before acting, and there they are projecting their impulsivity on you. So try using what's been called your wise mind when assessing someone's trustworthiness. Integrate your logical, rational thinking with your emotional awareness, your intuition, your gut feelings. You make decisions by considering things from an intellectual perspective without disregarding your life's experiences and intuitions. If you feel an instant connection with somebody, take that into account. But don't make it the entire basis of your decision about their trustworthiness. And then there's something known as automatic trust. In 2009, Bernard Bernie Madoff was sentenced to 150 years in prison and ordered to forfeit billions of dollars. Madoff, who died in 2021, was an American financier who executed the largest Ponzi scheme in history, defrauding thousands of investors out of tens of billions of dollars over the course of more than 15 years. How did Madoff dupe all these people, including his family, out of billions of dollars? He represented to clients and potential clients that through his skills and business acumen, he was able to generate large, steady returns, when in fact all he did was deposit client funds into bank accounts used to pay other clients when they wanted to cash out. He'd fund those redemptions by attracting new investors and their money. But he couldn't maintain the scheme when the stock market turned sharply lower in late 2008. Madoff confessed his illegal schemes to his sons, who he worked with. He claimed they weren't aware of their scheme, and it turns out that they apparently turned him into the authorities the next day. But the question is this: why did so many bright, seemingly savvy people buy into Madoff's scheme? Why did they trust him with their life savings? For one thing, the exceptionally high rate of return on his investments caused many of his clients to look the other way. He had all the trappings of success. He cultivated an image of exclusivity. He shrewdly turned away clients sometimes until they repeatedly begged him to invest for them. His client list included not only wealthy investors, but his own family, his brother, his sons, their wives. Those who have researched Madoff and his schemes suggest that he took advantage of something called that automatic trust process. You see, even if he didn't seem trustworthy to most people, the fact that his own relatives and many well-educated, financially successful people invested with him provided a kind of subtle and subconscious signal that he must be trustworthy. And he had a constant association with all sorts of philanthropic and religious organizations as well. And that encouraged people to trust him, to give that sense of automatic trust. In his book, The Thin Book of Trust, author and wellness coach Charles Feltman defined trust as choosing to make something that is important to me vulnerable to the actions of someone else. He defined distrust as being what I have shared with you that is important to me isn't safe with you. Author, researcher, and Professor Brené Brown has for many years studied, written about, and spoken extensively on the topic of trust, and she created the acronym BRAVING when referring to the elements that need to exist in a trusting relationship. BRAVING stands for boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. She said that she uses that acronym because when we trust, we are braving connection with someone else. By boundaries, she refers to the fact that in order to trust someone, it's essential that we're clear about the boundaries of our relationship so the other person can understand and respect our limits, and we theirs. Reliability means when someone does what they say they're going to do, not just one time, but over and over again, consistently. And it means don't overpromise. Deliver on your commitments. Follow through on your word. And she gives the example of running into an acquaintance at a coffee shop and feeling compelled to say, "Great to see you. I'll call you sometime," when you actually have no intention of calling. And that makes you unreliable and reflects a key element of trust. The takeaway is it's okay just to say, "Great to see you." The A in braving stands for accountability. We trust people who own up to their mistakes, apologize, and make amends. And we let them. If we write something off when they make a mistake, we don't give them a chance to step into their accountability. V in braving stands for vault. We can't trust someone if they share our personal information with others without our permission. It's as though they and we are a vault protecting that information. And you know, we've all experienced a situation when we or others use gossip as a way to try and quickly find a connection with someone. They call it a hot wiring of a trusting relationship or a counterfeit trust. When someone says to you, "I really shouldn't be saying anything because I was sworn to secrecy, but I know you'd want to know." That's a trust alert. I, integrity. Integrity, it's simple. It's choosing courage over comfort. It's choosing what's right over what's fast or easy. It's choosing to practice your values, not just preaching and professing them. N, non-judgment. This one's pretty self-explanatory. It's about being vulnerable with someone without being judged by them, and they in turn can be vulnerable with you and not judged by you. And the G in braving, the elements of a trusting relationship, this is an interesting one. A trusting relationship is one when you can assume the most generous, not financially generous, thing about each other's words, intentions, and behaviors. Case in point, a friend is supposed to meet you for coffee at 4 o'clock, and they don't show up. Generosity means you assume they forgot, not that they had a better offer and dismissed you. Braving. Studies have shown that trust is not age-dependent either. It seems that children as young as 4 or 5 years old have a sense of detecting trustworthiness and how to avoid being duped. In a research study from Harvard University, 4 and 5-year-olds were told that they were going to be taught new material by one of 2 instructors. One was their usual teacher who they knew and trusted. The other was a new person totally unknown to them. And it would be up to the kids to decide which instructor they would choose to go to. Researchers expected the kids would go to the person they already knew, liked, and trusted. But in the study, the known teacher was instructed beforehand to immediately begin making mistakes and gaffes, and the students could clearly see it. Eventually, the kids began seeking out the person who was more trustworthy and capable, even though they'd been a complete stranger. So, who can you trust? The Gallup Honesty and Ethics Poll dates to 1976, and it's been conducted every year since 1990. According to its 2021 poll, and for the 20th year in a row, the profession of nurses was rated as the most trusted profession. 81% of Americans ranked nurses as trustworthy, based on the Gallup poll scale of very high, high, average, low, or very low. Medical doctors landed in second place, falling behind nurses as the most trustworthy, followed by grade school teachers, pharmacists, and military officers. And at the bottom of the list of trustworthy professions, it was a tie: politicians and political lobbyists. So I have a question for you. Can you trust your gut? It's been called a sixth sense, a hunch, or a gut feeling. Whatever you call it, it's a sudden flash of insight you have that comes from within and can inspire either a sense of faith or a sense of urgency. That sense of unease about a person or a situation, feeling a heightened sense of suspicion or untrustworthiness. Although you may not be able to explain your feelings logically, you know something isn't quite right. Gut feelings can create a range of sensations, whether feeling anxious or uncomfortable, to goosebumps, feeling of having butterflies, to a sense of doom and gloom. Some people describe it as having an internal voice, and it seems like your brain is encouraging you to take notice of those feelings. And when it does, you should. Trust your gut refers to trusting those feelings of intuition, often as a way to stay true to yourself. And it seems that following your instinct can direct you toward the better path. Those gut feelings have been labeled many things in many different instances: tuition, instinct, foresight. Research studies have found that a lot of those gut feelings are actually the product of something called our enteric nervous system, an intricate network of neurons and neurotransmitters found in and around our gut that send signals to other neurons near our brain and spinal cords, sharing sensory information from our stomachs to our brain. So it seems that even if your mind is too preoccupied with something, your body can still pick up on things on some visceral level. You can also think of gut feelings as a type of prediction based on past experiences. Even memories you don't fully recall or information you may not consciously be aware of can guide you. In the final analysis, you should trust your gut, and using your wise mind, draw on your rational thoughts as well. Some psychologists have also found that physical touch has a strong connection to the experience of trust. In one experiment involving a game widely used to study decisions about trust, an experimenter made it a point while describing the task to ever so slightly touch the backs of individuals as they were about to play the game. People who received a quick and unobtrusive touch were more likely to cooperate with rather than compete against their partner. And it's no coincidence that greeting rituals throughout the world involve touching. Trust building, whether or not it's rubbing noses, shoulders, handshakes, fist bumps. It may well be that it doesn't take much to tip us towards trust. I'm Jay Elias. Thank you for watching this episode of Live and Learn. I hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to your joining me again for another program designed to enhance and encourage your personal wellness and awareness. Until then, remember, it's never too late to learn. And consider this: trust may well be the strong foundation for most of our relationships, but as strong as it may be, it's very fragile.